Neil, could you tell us a little bit about what we're standing in front of, why we're here?
Well, we're here because we're investigating what we thought and what we've since found to be a Neolithic passage tomb that was completely destroyed, or largely destroyed, when William Connolly had the Hellfire Club built, originally as a shooting lodge in 1725. He used all, the folklore says, he used all of the stone of an ancient tomb to build it, and that's where all the stories of the Hellfire Club begin, when the devil blew the roof off in rage at this and they had to rebuild it. So what we're looking to do is to start an excavation to see, can we prove that there's a Neolithic passage tomb here? And if we can we find anything that will give us a radiocarbon date? Because none of the tombs of the Dublin Wicklow Mountains have a date as yet, because the last ones investigated were in the 1930s and 20s. So it's a really good opportunity to look at the site in using new techniques in a modern way. We wanted to establish how much of the site was left from that, so we put this trench through this mound material to see if it related, if it was intact, if any of the cairn was still intact, and indeed we found it is, with all these bands of stone. That's the rubble core of it, you know. It would have stood significantly high, you know, it would have been visible for miles and miles around. The second trench at the top was to see if we could find any external features, or if any of the northern side of the tomb still remained intact. And we're getting a little bit just at the edge of the trench there. That's what we wanted to do for this season, and we were really excited to find that we could answer all of those questions. You know, we found charcoal at the base of it, so hopefully that's going to give us a date. We've established that some of it survives intact, and we've been able to establish as well it's a passage tomb based on some of the findings that we've discovered as we've been excavating. So we found everything from proof of the destruction in things like this lovely clay tobacco pipe, which has a claw holding an egg kind of thing, whether it's a bird's claw, or if you're Game of Thrones fan, maybe dragon's claw, I'm not sure. But we have the factory stamp on that as well, so we'll be able to find out who made that and when. If it was one of the guys building the old military road and taking the tomb apart, I'm very glad he dropped his pipe and it broke on it, you know, for doing that. So this is the star of the show so far, and this is a polished stone axe head. But you can see it's been broken perhaps in antiquity, perhaps when it was made, and it was broken to ceremonially give it to the next life, if you like. But also looking at the edge of it, it looks like it was never used. So it seems to have been deliberately made to be deposited in this tomb, perhaps as an offering to a loved one, as grave goods to take with them into the next world, or perhaps as a ceremonial offering to the gods or the ancestors. We don't quite know, but we found this actually in a quite mixed deposit from the destruction phase, probably relating to the 1800s. So they'd obviously dug it out and never even noticed it. To them it was just a stone.
Just a stone.
Yeah, just a useless stone. There was a great deal of excitement with it, because when you're all working away together, and you're constantly checking the soil as you're digging, you're constantly looking for things that don't quite look natural, and 100 times a day you pick up a bit of stone and you're like, is it? No. And you throw it. But now and again something like that crops up, and it just gives great excitement to everyone in the dig. It's a great reward. Yeah. Artefacts, I suppose, are only part of the story of archaeology in a way. They can be really, really nice, and they can tell a big, big story themselves, but they're not the be-all and end-all. For example, the soil that we'll be taking samples of and such like that, sometimes that traps pollen, and that can tell a whole big story about what the environment was like at the time. You know, what crops did they grow? Was the forest around here? So that in itself is a really, really important artefact, but it's not very flashy, it's not very easy to see. Passage tombs are very rarely dug in Ireland. They're very, very important sites, so it's rare enough to get permission. So the National Monuments Service and the National Museum have both been incredibly supportive on this project. And I think the last one to be excavated was Knockrow on the border of Kilkenny and Tipperary, and that was done in the mid-90s by Professor Marissa Sullivan. So it's a really rare opportunity to have a look at this, and we were delighted that everyone was on board with it from the start.